Chapter 432. When the Phoenix Guards saw their master complain to the man called Yama Lord with a wronged expression, the corners of their mouths couldn't help but twitch, and they all lowered their heads. Perhaps it was because they had seen their master's cold and ruthless methods, but they couldn't get used to her innocent and wronged appearance. Although her clear eyes were clear and innocent, and no matter how they looked at it, they didn't really think that their master was pure and harmless. When the Yama Lord heard her complaint, his entire body emitted a murderous aura. His deep eyes became cold, and a cold, murderous aura flashed through his eyes. He raised his eyes to look at the nascent soul eccentric, and his voice was cold and sinister. "Oh, he wants to cripple you?" Fangio nodded heavily and continued to say in a wronged manner. "He relies on his nascent soul eccentric status to bully people. And that Crown Prince Qingtang, I don't know where this thing came from, but he mysteriously wants to take me in as a secondary princess." "What secondary princess?" "To put it bluntly, it's just a concubine. I am the dignified Feng Manor's eldest young miss. Could it be that I would fancy the position of a concubine? I clearly said that I won't marry, but they rely on their numbers and want to steal me. They even said that they want to cripple me and lock me up." Hearing this, the Yama Lord didn't say anything for the time being. Even Hui Lang and Ing Yi, who were standing behind the Yama Lord, stared strangely at the nascent soul eccentric and Crown Prince Qingtang. They didn't even ask who the Feng family's eldest young miss was? What was her status? They wanted to take her in as a secondary princess? Take the ghost doctor as a secondary princess? Only they could do such a strange thing. Thinking of how noble his master's status was, the ghost doctor didn't even look at him. Cough, cough. It was that she wasn't moved. Just a trifling sixth-tier small country dared to steal someone from his master? And they wanted to steal? They were really indulging in fantasy. However, their expressions were strange as they looked at the Qingtang guards on the ground, who were in so much pain that they couldn't even cry out in pain. They felt that this scene wasn't quite like what the ghost doctor had said about them bullying her just because they had more people. No matter how they looked at it, it was the ghost doctor who was bullying people. Furthermore, she had taken care of most of the Qingtang kingdom's people without losing a single soldier. It was likely that only the nascent soul eccentric and Crown Prince Qingtang kingdoms were unharmed. When the people around her heard her words, they all had different expressions on their faces as their eyes flashed. The Yama Lord and the two men behind him had just arrived and didn't know. They had seen everything from beginning to end. Although it seemed that the Qingtang kingdom's people had the upper hand the entire time, when they saw the people lying on the ground, they knew that not a single person from the Feng Manor had been harmed. On the contrary, the guards and generals sent by the country's ruler had all been killed by the hands of the seemingly harmless eldest young Miss Feng. Also, ever since eldest young Miss Feng had come out of the Feng Manor, even if she knew that the old man was a nascent soul eccentric, they did not see the slightest bit of fear or panic on her face. On the contrary, when they saw the masked man in black robes appear, they thought for a moment that she wanted to hide back in the Feng Manor. At first, they were a bit surprised, but when they thought of what the man in black robes had said, they understood. Thinking about it, eldest young Miss Feng had owed a debt of love outside, and this man had chased her all the way to the Feng Manor. However, why did eldest young Miss Feng complain to him? Could it be that the man in black robes would go against a nascent soul eccentric for her? Chapter 433. After hearing eldest Miss Feng's words, the black-robed man, who was exuding a cold, murderous aura, curled his lips and revealed a faint smile. When his deep eyes moved away from eldest Miss Feng, the coldness and murderous aura in his black eyes made everyone's hearts tremble. "Bully you? No problem. I'll help you vent your anger." The man, whose entire body was filled with murderous intent, used a pampering tone to say these words. In the next moment, his entire body swept out like a ghost. His speed was so fast that it actually caused a fierce airflow around him. The nascent soul cultivator was already on guard. He felt a great threat from this person, especially when the person stared at him. The cold, murderous intent in his eyes made him fearful. Even though this person didn't look very old, in the cultivation world, the higher one's cultivation level, the more they could maintain their appearance at their peak. He didn't dare to be careless. He was afraid that this person was an old monster who had cultivated for hundreds of years. Seeing the cold aura coming towards him, the nascent soul cultivator instinctively wanted to distance himself from this person. However, this person's speed was too fast. In the blink of an eye, this person was right in front of him. A powerful pressure enveloped him like Mount Tai, instantly making him unable to move. His eyes widened in shock as he stared at the black-robed man in front of him in shock. Just as he was about to cry out and beg for mercy, he saw his chin being crushed with a crack. Intense pain assaulted him, and before he could react, he felt all the bones in his body being crushed. For a moment, the sound of his bones breaking rang out. Adot, with his chin broken, he could only vaguely let out a shrill cry of pain. The pain of having his bones broken spread throughout his mind and body. Every pinch made him suffer the torment of pain. Every bone that was broken made him feel the pain of having his bones broken. This man, he clearly had the ability to kill him in an instant, but he insisted on torturing him and letting him experience all kinds of pain before dying. At this moment, he felt an aura of death he had never felt before. The powerful aura from the black-robed man enveloped him and turned into a terrifying aura of death. At this moment, he knew very well that if he didn't run, he would die here. Hundreds of years of cultivation would turn to ashes with his death. He would disappear from this world. Run, run. He had to run for his life. Escape at all costs. The fear and shock in his heart made him summon his nascent soul without thinking. The nascent soul was a spiritual body cultivated by a nascent soul cultivator. It was a protective talisman that could save one's life at a critical moment. It was the essence of a nascent soul cultivator. Even if this body was gone, as long as the nascent soul was still there, he could transform into a human again. However, using a nascent soul was a dead end. This was because the nascent soul had no offensive power and was so weak that it could be killed by anyone. Unless it was absolutely necessary, a nascent soul cultivator would not use his nascent soul to save his life. The surrounding crowd was shocked by this scene. They only saw the nascent soul cultivator being crippled by the black-robed man without being able to resist at all. The sound of bones shattering caused all the hair on their bodies to stand on end. They only felt that it was too terrifying. There was clearly no intense battle, and there was clearly no scene of blood splattering everywhere. However, this scene deeply shocked everyone's hearts. Chapter 434. The thing seemed to be frightened by something and flew out in a panic. When the thing stretched out and turned around, everyone was shocked. This was because it was a face that was somewhat similar to that of a nascent soul cultivator. However, the difference was that the nascent soul cultivator's face was covered in wrinkles, making him look old. When he stretched out his hand, he looked like a newborn. He was a miniature version of the nascent soul cultivator, but his body was slightly larger than a fist. He was completely naked and protected by spiritual energy. At this moment, he was using his hands and feet to try and escape. "That's a nascent soul," someone exclaimed. This was the first time they had seen such a thing. After all, even in a small rank 9 country, golden core cultivators were rare, let alone nascent soul cultivators. They had heard of nascent soul cultivators forming a nascent soul in their dantian, but they didn't expect to see it one day. At the same time that the nascent soul flew out, the nascent soul cultivator's body also stopped breathing and fell to the ground. This scene caused Nyeting's face to turn pale. He stared at the black-robed man, but he couldn't move. The difference in strength was too great. In front of the black-robed man, he didn't even have a chance to attack. In fact, the black-robed man only needed to release his pressure to suppress him. If he was like this, there was no need to talk about the others. When the golden core cultivators saw this scene, they all retreated in shock. However, they didn't run away because Nyetang was still there. Otherwise, they would have already run for their lives. The infernal lord glanced at the nascent soul that was fleeing in panic. With a flick of his sleeve, he let out a cold harumph. Just as he was about to attack and kill the nascent soul, a snow-white figure suddenly let out a roar and pounced forward. Amidst the nascent soul's horrified screams, the snow-white figure bit it and swallowed it. Everyone looked at this scene in shock. They thought that the nascent soul would escape or be killed by the black-robed man. But who would have thought that it would be swallowed by a snow-white ball-like pet? Perhaps it was because this scene was too inconceivable, but everyone's eyes widened, and they were unable to regain their senses for a long time. Then, they saw the little pet that had swallowed the nascent soul in midair and landed steadily on the ground. It burped and trembled all over before growing at a speed visible to the naked eye. 1 circle, 2 circles, 3 circles. The originally ball-like pet had grown into a ferocious beast that was even larger than a lion within a few breaths. The snow-white fur on its body was long and drooped down to its side. However, it was a little loose, making its entire body appear even larger. The shining beast tattoo on its forehead was extremely eye-catching. Roar! The cloud-swallowing beast stretched and roared, as if it had eaten its fill. It stuck out its tongue and licked the corner of its mouth. It even raised a paw and elegantly wiped the corner of its mouth. Its pair of ferocious eyes glanced at the people around it. When it saw the Yama Lord, there was a hint of fear and avoidance. It let out a low roar, swung its tail, raised its head, and slowly walked back to the Fengjiu's side. It lay on the ground lazily. Chapter 435. Fengjiu couldn't help but swallow her saliva as she stared at Xiao, who was lying on the ground behind her. She felt extremely curious. She didn't know that this little thing was actually such a huge beast. The beast pattern on its head changed after it swallowed the nascent soul. Did it evolve? She knew that Xiao wasn't an ordinary pet, but she didn't see any changes in it. However, based on the beast pattern, it seemed to have evolved from a sacred beast to a divine beast. The Yama Lord glanced at the cloud-swallowing beast behind Fengjiu, then at the 7 or 8 golden core cultivators. Seeing that they were retreating in fear, his gaze landed on the crown prince of Qingting, Nietong. When the black-robed middle-aged cultivator saw this, he was shocked, but he still stood in front of Nietong. The Lord of Hell glanced at them and waved his sleeves. A powerful air current surged out and sent the two of them flying dozens of meters away. His deep voice was filled with a majestic aura as he slowly spoke. Get out of the dazzling sun territory. If you dare to offend me again, I will destroy your Qingting kingdom. Nietong fell to the ground and blood flowed out of his mouth. He pursed his lips and stared at him without saying a word. The middle-aged cultivator in black didn't care about his injuries and hurriedly kowtowed. Thank you, Yama Lord, for not killing us. We will leave immediately. Seeing that he killed the nascent soul cultivator, he was extremely scared. If he really wanted to kill his master, they wouldn't be able to protect the crown prince even if they risked their lives. Fortunately, he didn't have any killing intent when he attacked. Otherwise, none of them would have been able to leave alive. What are you all waiting for? Let's go. The middle-aged cultivator in black helped Nietong up and shouted at the crowd and the golden core cultivators on the ground. They quickly rushed towards the flying ship. They came with an imposing aura, but left in a sorry state. They were even panicking, afraid that they would kill them all. The crowd watched as the people from the Qingtang kingdom left quickly. Someone shouted out a cheer, and the whole place became lively again. The only difference was that this time, it was the sound of laughter and cheering. Amidst the cheers and laughter of the crowd, the Yama Lord turned to look at the dazzling figure. This was the first time he saw her in women's clothing, but in his eyes, it was as if he was familiar with her thousands of times. She was so similar to the her in his painting, so mesmerizing that he couldn't help himself. He stared at her, and there was only her in his deep black eyes. Thinking of her dependent eyes and her aggrieved look when she complained to him, his heart couldn't help but melt into a puddle of water, unbelievably soft. When his gaze became gentler and more tender, he strode towards her. Since Master is tired, how about you rest in the Feng Manor for the time being? Huilang glanced at the respectful Ling Yi and felt that this person was used to taking advantage of others. That's right, if he wasn't so observant, how could he be the #1 shadow guard? Moreover, he was always by his master's side. Thus, under the two's suggestion, the Yama Lord had a heavy expression, pursed his lips, and walked into the Feng Manor with his hands behind his back. The Phoenix guards standing guard in front of the Feng Manor did not stop him because it seemed that this person was very familiar with their master. Since he was not an enemy, he was their guest. After Fengjiu and the Yama Lord entered the manor, the Phoenix guards outside quickly cleaned up the aftermath of the battle. They ordered people to carry the 10 chests of treasures into the Feng Manor, treating them as spoils of war. Chapter 437. Lung Shuang, who had followed them, glanced at them and said, "I can take you to the guest room to rest. I'm asking about her courtyard." The Yama Lord's voice was low as he stared at her sharply. Lung Shuang was about to speak when he was pulled aside by Luoyu. Luoyu smiled and said to the Yama Lord, "I can tell at a glance that you have a special relationship with our master. Others can't go to her courtyard, but you can. Let me lead the way." As he spoke, he made a gesture of invitation and led them to Fengjiu's courtyard. The Yama Lord walked forward, while Hui Lang and Ying Yi looked at Luoyu in surprise. They felt that this person was quite sensible. With their master's strength and tyranny, if he said that he wanted to go to the ghost doctor's courtyard, then he must go to her courtyard. He was in a bad mood. Who would dare to stop him? They would definitely suffer. After leading them to Fengjiu's courtyard, Luoyu left. Hui Lang and Ying Yi walked around the courtyard, looking at the quiet and elegant courtyard. The Yama Lord had already pushed open the door and entered the room. On the other side, Fengjiu hurried to her father's courtyard. Seeing the faint smell of blood in the courtyard, her gaze turned cold and she asked, "Who's injured?" "Eldest miss, don't worry. Master is fine." Luoyu's master saw her and hurriedly said, telling her not to worry. Fengjiu's gaze swept across the several people in the courtyard. Seeing that one of the 8 was missing, she asked, "Where's Uncle Qi?" That was Qi Kang's master. Seeing that the 8 of them were loyal and devoted to her father and his elders, she respectfully addressed them as uncle. In the room, Long Hua is helping old Qi apply medicine. Hearing this, she nodded and quickly walked into the room. As soon as she entered the room, the thick smell of blood rushed to her face. She frowned, but when she saw that her father, who was standing at the side helping to bandage the wound, was fine, she heaved a sigh of relief. She looked at Master Qi Kong, whose face was pale and seemed to have lost too much blood. "Xiaojiu, you're here? Look, old Qi is seriously injured." Feng Xiao said quickly and asked her to come forward. "It's okay. He won't die. Don't worry, Mississippi." Qi Kang's master smiled, but his pale face couldn't lie. Seeing this, Fengjiu poured out a medicinal pill for him to consume, then treated his wounds. After bandaging them, he said, "Uncle Qi, your injuries aren't light, and you've lost a lot of blood. Rest well for the next few days." He paused for a moment before instructing, "Lung Hua, help Uncle Qi back to rest. Let Qi Kong take care of him." "Yes," Lung Hua responded and helped Qi Kang's master out of the courtyard. "Father, don't worry and recuperate. The matters outside have been settled," Fengjiu said as he prepared to leave. Seeing that she didn't mention the attack in the courtyard, he sighed and asked, "Xiaojiu, what do you want to do?" He didn't expect that Morong Bo would take advantage of the fact that the people of Qingting Kingdom were dealing with Feng Manor to kidnap them. If it weren't for the 8 Wu Zongs protecting the courtyard, he was afraid it can only be done once, but not twice. Since he doesn't want to stop, then I won't be polite to him. Her eyes were cold and her tone was fierce. Morong Bo, if this person wasn't eliminated, he would become a big problem. But he's Yishuan's father. Hearing this, Fengjiu's eyes moved slightly, but he didn't say much and walked out. Morong Yishuan could be said to be the person that the original owner didn't want to hurt the most. He was also the person she loved deeply. If she didn't have to, she wouldn't touch him. However, Morong Bo wasn't so lucky. Chapter 438. Fengjiu was stunned for a moment. That was the Yama Lord? This is bad. She had actually forgotten about him just now. Seeing his master's expression, Luoyu hesitated a bit before saying, he looked a bit angry. His entire body was filled with killing intent. That's right, that man's entire body was filled with killing intent. He was certain that if Lung Shuang had tried to stop him at that time, he would have been sent flying. "All right, you can go busy yourself with outside matters." If you see him, try to avoid him as much as possible. That fellow isn't easy to get along with." She gave a soft sigh and waved her hand, indicating for him to leave. She braced herself and walked towards the courtyard. Yi stood guard at the door while Hui Lang wandered around the courtyard. Looking here and there, he clicked his tongue and said, "I never thought that the ghost doctor would be so charming when dressed in red as a man, but still so enchanting when dressed in red as a woman. No wonder Master is so infatuated with her. Master's charm isn't bad either. I really don't understand. Why is it that when it comes to the ghost doctor, Master's charm doesn't have any effect?" Hui Lang stood there alone for a long time without hearing Yi's response. He turned around to look at him and said, "Why aren't you saying anything?" Yi stood straight at the door and glanced at him before saying, "I never talk about Master's matters." "Chi, come on, you." Hui Lang sneered as if he had heard something funny. He was about to say something when he saw a red figure walk over. His eyes lit up and he quickly ran over. "Hey, ghost doctor? Eldest young Miss Feng? Which one should I call her?" Hui Lang's eyes lit up as he stared at her, feeling that this was inconceivable. This was clearly a woman, but they hadn't noticed at the time. It really was strange. Only, how did Master find out that the ghost doctor was a woman? This question had been in his heart for a long time, and he really needed to find a chance to ask. Fangzhou glanced at Hui Lang. This big fool. He had fallen into her hands so many times. So why was he still so happy to see her? "Where's your master?" She looked into the courtyard. Other than Yi standing at the door, there was no one else. "Master is in your room." Hui Lang grinned. In the past, no matter how he looked at the ghost doctor, that brat, he didn't like the way he looked at him, who asked him to turn his wise and mighty master gay. However, ever since he found out that the ghost doctor was a woman, no matter how he looked at her, she was pleasing to the eye. One had to know that she was most likely their master's woman. That meant that she was their madam. If they didn't curry favor with her now, when should they wait? "Ghost doctor, Master isn't in a good mood," he reminded her softly. Fangzhou, who was about to step in, paused when he heard this. Luo Yu had said it before, and now Hui Lang had also said it. Was it really not good? Thinking of this, she glanced at Hui Lang with a strange expression and asked, "Why did you come here for no reason? Are you really here to look for me?" How could she not know that the Yama Lord cared so much about her? Did he come all the way here to look for her? Hearing this, Hui Lang froze for a moment. "We came here especially to look for you. After asking around for a long time, we found out that you were here. We originally wanted to come here a long time ago, but Master was held back by the matters at hand and delayed until now. When we heard that Qing Tung's crown prince had brought people to propose, Master directly put down the matters at hand and rushed over with the two of us. There's still a group of people behind us who will probably arrive a few days later." Chapter 439. Hearing the low voice coming from the room, Hui Lang's body tensed up, and he automatically took a few steps back to distance himself from Fangzhou. When Fangzhou heard the low and angry voice, her scalp went numb. She suddenly turned to Hui Lang and said, "I just remembered that there are still some things I haven't done yet. And tell your master that I'll come back later." As soon as she finished speaking, she was about to turn and leave when the door creaked open. "Are you afraid that I'll eat you?" The Yama Lord glared at her angrily. Looking at the woman who was shrinking her shoulders and trying to slip away, he wanted to grab her and spank her to teach her a lesson. "Hee, why would I? I just don't want to disturb your rest." She smiled embarrassedly and turned to look at him. "Come here." He stood with his hands behind his back, staring at her with his deep eyes. "What's the matter?" she asked, but still walked towards him under his gaze. She sighed inwardly. Sure enough, she took advantage of him so much that she felt guilty when facing him. The Yama Lord's gaze swept over Yi and Hui Lang, and the two immediately understood. They respectfully bowed and left. For a moment, there were only two people left in the courtyard. One stood at the door, and the other stood in the middle of the courtyard. Fangzhou saw that there were only two people left, and it seemed that the Yama Lord didn't intend to come out at all. She felt that it was quite dangerous for a man and a woman to be alone in a room, so she stood still in the courtyard. The two of them had two different thoughts. One of them didn't want to be alone with him, while the other wanted to be alone with her. As a result, one of them stood motionless at the door, while the other stood in the courtyard and didn't move closer. They stared at each other, creating a very strange atmosphere. "Didn't I tell you to come here?" He suppressed his anger and glared at her, thinking that she didn't know what was good for her. "Hey, I think standing here is good enough. What can't we talk about in the courtyard? Look, the weather is quite good." She looked up at the sky and saw that the sky was dark. A dark cloud floated past as if it was going to rain. She couldn't help but smile awkwardly. The Yama Lord was so angry that he laughed when he saw how guarded she was against him. He went forward and pulled her into the room. "Hey, Yama Lord, can you not be so rude? Although it's broad daylight, it's really not good for a man and a woman to be in the same room." She was pulled into the room and shouted as she tried to pull her hand back, but she was not as strong as him. "Don't worry, if your reputation is ruined, I will take responsibility." Hearing this, the corner of her mouth twitched, and she hurriedly said, "That's not." Before she could finish, she was dumbfounded. She saw him flick his sleeve, and a gust of wind swept past, slamming the door shut with a bang. Immediately, she became nervous and hurriedly said, "Why are you closing the door in broad daylight? If I don't close the door, how can I continue what I haven't finished?" His angry voice was low and magnetic, and it was very seductive. When she heard it, her heart couldn't help but flutter. She couldn't help but ask, "What is it that you haven't finished?" Chapter 440. She let out a muffled groan as she widened her eyes in shock and glared at him angrily. Then, she saw that the King of Hell, who had taken off his mask, had actually covered her eyes with his hand, blocking her fiery gaze. The cold scent that belonged only to him assailed her nostrils. His thin lips that were filled with the scent of a man brushed against her moist red lips. With a bit of fanaticism and a bit of punishment, he fiercely kissed. No, he bit her lips. Her face was filled with black lines. She was speechless and stunned. Was she being forcefully kissed? A wolf kissed her? He was as ferocious as a wolf, but what did he mean by biting her like he was gnawing on her bones? The pain from her lips and waist made her scrunch up her face. However, her hands were restrained, her lips were sealed, and even her eyes were covered. Although this Yama Lord was a good-looking man with a perfect body and looks, what the hell was with this random nibbling kiss? Unlike Fengzhou's reaction and feelings, the Yama Lord's reaction was uncontrollable excitement and agitation. He had wanted to do this for a long time. It was not that he had not found the opportunity, but he was too embarrassed to kiss her. Today, he was angered by this woman and kissed her directly. Moreover, she tasted really good, soft and sweet. When their lips touched, it made him feel a trace of nervousness, a trace of apprehension, and a trace of excitement. In short, it was a wonderful feeling that made him reluctant to let go of her. After a long while, he finally realized that the woman he had been kissing for most of the day seemed to be stiff and unresponsive. Only then did he move his hand away from her eyes in confusion. The moment he moved his hand away, he saw a pair of eyes that were almost burning with anger. At this moment, his lips were still pressed against hers, but in this moment of shock, he saw her open her mouth and bite him fiercely. Hiss! Unable to react in time, he sucked in a breath of cold air and moved back slightly. When he felt the salty taste of blood on his lips, he was stunned and looked at her strangely. Was she responding to his kiss? If Fengzhou knew what he was thinking at this moment, he would definitely scold him. "Go back to your head. Was that a kiss? You were clearly nibbling. Let go of me," she angrily shouted. Seeing that he still had a strange look on his face, she couldn't help but angrily scold. "My waist is hurt." Hearing that her waist was hurt, the Yama Lord was stunned and panicked. He quickly let go of her and helped her up. "Let me see. How did you get hurt?" After helping her up from the bed, he saw a medicine bottle under the thin blanket on the bed. No wonder she said she was hurt. "Ouch, it hurts." She frowned her beautiful little face and sucked in a breath of cold air. She carefully rubbed her waist. His entire body was pushed down onto the bottle without any warning. Not only that, that fellow even pressed down on him. How could he not be injured? Grey Wolf and Yi, who were guarding outside the courtyard, had been listening curiously. However, because they were far away and the door was closed, they couldn't hear clearly. But at this time, when they heard Feng Ix's gasp and cry of pain, they couldn't help but look at each other. Chapter 441. At this moment, even Yi's gaze shifted slightly. Looking at the tightly shut door, a strange expression appeared on his face. He thought to himself, it's broad daylight. Even if Master wants the ghost doctor, he wouldn't do anything rash, right? Thinking of this, he coughed lightly and said in a serious tone, don't think too much. What could the two of them do in broad daylight? Huilang glanced at him with disdain. If you're not thinking too much, how do you know I'm thinking too much? As soon as his voice fell, an excited smile appeared on his face. Although I do want Master and the ghost doctor to do something in there, you're right. It's broad daylight. Master shouldn't be so impulsive. But just as he said this, they heard the ghost doctor's angry scolding and Master's anxious voice from inside. The two people's expressions became strange again. Fuck. What are you doing? If you don't take it off yourself, I'll have to do it myself. Hiss. Bastard. Don't tear my clothes. If I don't tear, how can I see? Scram. Don't move. Hiss. My waist. It hurts. It hurts. It hurts. Be gentler. Relax. It won't hurt in a while. Hearing this, the two people guarding outside the courtyard were stunned. They stared dumbfoundedly at the tightly shut door and windows of the room. Their hearts were filled with excitement, and surprise. Did Master pounce on the ghost doctor? And he did it in broad daylight? Wasn't this too fierce? However, in the room, it was a different scene. Fangio was lying on the bed. Her red clothes had been torn at her waist by the Yama Lord, revealing a large patch of snow-white skin. However, there was a bruise on this patch of skin. The Yama Lord was applying medicine to the bruise, then gently rubbing it to dissolve the blood clot. Every time he rubbed, Fangio hissed in pain. He didn't use much strength, but he still saw her forehead oozing with a layer of sweat from the pain. Seeing her small face scrunched up, he couldn't help but feel a burst of heartache. The movements of his hands also followed suit. The original light rubbing became light stroking. This way, it didn't hurt, but Fangio's whole body was covered with goosebumps. All right, stop rubbing. Hearing the disdainful words, Yin Zhu's face darkened. However, when he remembered that he was the one who had caused her waist to be bruised, he could not get angry. Then, when he thought of his earlier ferocious actions, his ears could not help but burn. Now that the anger he had been suppressing had dissipated, he felt a little uncomfortable. However, he was an arrogant person. Even if he wasn't there, he wouldn't let her see it. Hence, with a dark expression and pursed lips, he took a step back and stood by the bed looking at the woman lying on the bed. His gaze fell on the clothes that had been torn by her. His eyes moved slightly, and he coughed lightly and asked, "Where are your clothes?" "This lord will get you a set to change into." Fangio glared at him and said in a bad mood, "Go out and call Lung Shuang over. Have someone prepare water. I want to take a bath." The Yama Lord glanced at her. When his gaze swept past her slightly red and swollen lips, his face was slightly hot and uncomfortable. He quickly looked away and replied with a cold face, "You lie down. This lord will help you call someone." As he spoke, he walked out of the room. Fangio had been staring at him, so she saw his uncomfortable expression and flushed ears. Her heart was slightly surprised. After he left the room and closed the door, she couldn't help but curse. Chapter 442. When Huilang and Yi saw their master come out, they could not help but be surprised. "So fast? Master, you've come out?" The two walked closer and saw that his ears were still slightly red. They smiled internally. They never thought that their master would be shy. How rare. However, wasn't this speed a bit too fast? The Grey Wolf stared at him and looked him over. He wondered if he should have the Feng Manor's kitchen prepare something to supplement his master's body. The Yama Lord calmed himself down and glanced at the two. Seeing that they were looking at him strangely, his face sank. "What are you standing there for? Go and find that girl called Lung Shuang. Also, have someone send in some hot water for her to take a bath." Hearing this, Hui Lang grinned. "Good, good, good. This subordinate will go immediately." Immediately. Haha, it seemed like it was a success. Earlier, they had been worried that their master's pursuit of his wife would take a long time. Who knew that in just a short while, their master would take care of the ghost doctor and even eat her up in broad daylight. TSK, TSK. This speed really left them in the dust. Seeing Hui Lang excitedly run off, the Yama Lord was a bit confused. However, thinking about how Hui Lang had always been unreliable, he did not pay him any attention. Instead, he said to Ing Yi, "Take out a few things from your space. Come with me to see the head of the Feng family." Yes, Ing Yi respectfully complied. He took out the gifts he had prepared from his space. Holding them in his hand, he followed behind his master and headed towards Feng Zhao's courtyard. Along the way, the people of the Feng Manor all respectfully saluted the Yama Lord when they saw him. They knew that this black-robed man had killed a nascent soul cultivator with a flick of his wrist. Also, if he had not acted, their Feng Manor would have met with a disaster today. The higher-ups of the manor had already told them that he was an important guest of the Feng Manor. They could not neglect him. On the other side, someone also reported to Feng Xiao about the Yama Lord. Therefore, when Feng Xiao heard that the Yama Lord came to visit, he didn't refuse. Instead, he asked someone to invite him in. When the door opened and the man wearing a black robe with dark flower patterns walked in, Feng Xiao couldn't help but be slightly surprised. It was a man in his 20s. His entire body was filled with a resolute and fierce kingly aura. That noble temperament made him, who was used to seeing all kinds of outstanding people, want to praise him. What a peerlessly handsome man. His face was perfect and impeccable. His facial features were outstanding, and there was no sense of disharmony. Every part of his face seemed to have been carefully carved by the heavens, gathering the best of heaven and earth into his body. This kind of man had the appearance of a celestial being, the noble temperament, and the domineering aura of a king. He was like a god above the 9 heavens, so noble that no one dared to look directly at him. At that moment, even he felt a bit nervous in front of him. That was because his aura was simply too intimidating. However, he did not know that while he was nervous, the Yama Lord was even more nervous than him. It was because of his nervousness that the kingly aura from his body could not be concealed. It was because of his nervousness that his face was a bit stiff. He wanted to pull out a smile and do his best to soften his aura, but he could not do it. The more he tried, the more nervous he became. In the end, his handsome face became cold and stiff, as if he had facial paralysis. Chapter 443. Ing, who was carrying a gift behind him, saw his master's stiff body and knew that he was nervous. He looked at Feng Xiao and saw that he was also nervous. He stood there and seemed to have forgotten how to greet the guest. He knew that he must have been shocked by the majestic aura that his master exuded. That's right. Master's cultivation was so high. In addition to his noble status, he was born with an innate noble aura. This noble aura was not something that normal people could compare to. Anyone who saw it would be like this Feng family head. Only when he met the ghost doctor, that weirdo, did Master's dignified charm not come in handy. As his master's personal shadow guard, he naturally knew how to deal with this situation. Thus, he carried the gift forward and bowed. "Feng family head, this is my master. He has come to your residence today to pay you a visit. This is a small gift from my master. I hope that Feng family head will accept it." At this moment, the Yama Lord bowed like a junior and said, "I've always wanted to pay you a visit, but I didn't expect to have the chance today. If there's anything that I can't do, please don't blame me, Uncle Feng." The greeting of Uncle Feng made Feng Xiao smile. When he saw him again, he greeted him as a junior. In his heart, he was even more satisfied with people of this age. At that moment, he was no longer nervous and recovered his calm demeanor as the head of the family. He laughed loudly and said, "Good, good, good. You're so considerate." Seeing this, the Yama Lord was relieved. His anxious heart finally calmed down and a smile finally appeared on his face. He nodded and sat down at the table. Ing saw that the two of them had returned to normal and respectfully retreated to the side. Lung Hua brought a cup of tea over and then waited behind Feng Xiao. At the same time, he curiously sized up the man in the black robe who was sitting upright. "May I know your name?" Feng Xiao looked at the Yama Lord and asked. "Uncle Feng, you can call me Mohan," he said in a gentle voice. "Oh, Mohan." Feng Xiao nodded. He looked at him and asked, "How did you meet my Xiaojie? Why haven't I heard Xiaojie mention you before? Why didn't his daughter mention such a person? It shouldn't be. The first time I met her was on the streets." At that time, the Yama Lord told him about his encounter with Fengjiu. Of course, he was careful and only picked the good parts. He did not mention anything about him kidnapping her. Although this was the first time the two had met, they had a lot to talk about, and the more they talked, the more harmonious they got along. Even Ing Yi and Lung Hua couldn't help but raise their eyebrows. On the other side, Feng Jie, who had finished bathing, heard from Lung Shuang that Yin Zhu had gone to her father's courtyard. She couldn't help but be a little surprised. Why did he go to her father's courtyard? Wasn't he afraid of being chased out? However, she was not in the mood to care about the Yama Lord. She had other things to do. After getting dressed, she walked out of the house and said to Lung Shuang, "Call a few golden core adepts over. I have something to instruct them." However, before Lung Shuang could walk out of the house, he saw Hui Lang, who had been peeking out of the house, walk out with a grin. "Ghost Doctor, what do you need people to do? I can help too," he said eagerly and jogged in front of her. He wanted to perform well in front of her. Chapter 444. Whenever Master has something to do, she will tell me to do it. Although I am also a golden core cultivator, my techniques and experience are much better than those golden core cultivators. Right now, Master is also in the Feng Manor. Also, Master originally wanted to rush over and help Ghost Doctor resolve some problems. If Ghost Doctor has any problems that need to be resolved, you can tell me to do it. I definitely will not disappoint your expectations. Seeing him pat his chest and act as if he had everything to rely on, Fengjiu could not help but be surprised. When had Hui Lang become like this with her? Normally, no matter how he looked at her, he did not find her pleasing to the eye. Now, he had delivered himself to her doorstep? Her eyes turned and she thought to herself, "It would be a waste not to use labor that has been delivered to my doorstep." Also, Hui Lang's techniques and ability to hide his presence are indeed better than the 4 golden core cultivators under her. "Since it's like this, Dadan, come here." She hooked her finger, indicating for him to come closer. Seeing this, Hui Lang excitedly walked forward and leaned in to listen to her orders. After hearing her words, his eyes lit up and he nodded from time to time. "Take it." After giving her orders, Fengjiu threw a medicine bottle to him. Ghost Doctor, don't worry. Leave this to me." He cracked a smile and rubbed his hands together in excitement. "I have not spread the Ghost Doctor's identity, so don't call me Ghost Doctor." "Yes, then I will call you Doc." He originally wanted to call her Madam, but thinking about it, girls were all thin-skinned. This master had not sent any betrothal gifts, so it would not be good to call her Madam. Thus, he changed the topic and said, "I will call you Eldest Young Miss. Madam or whatever," he could change it later. At the same time, in the Imperial Palace, Murong Bo's expression was panicked and he could not sit still. The people of Qingtang country had returned empty-handed. It was as if they had fled. There was also that nascent soul cultivator. All of his bones had been crushed by someone who had appeared out of nowhere. After being tortured, he wanted to use his nascent soul to escape, but he was swallowed by a vicious beast. This string of news caused him to break out in a cold sweat. Ever since he returned, he had been walking around the hall, thinking back and forth, thinking of a way to remedy the situation. He never thought that the Feng Manor's strength would be so inconceivable. They actually dared to confront the people of the Qingting Kingdom head-on. They actually dared to attack them without fearing the might of a 6th-grade kingdom. Such an outcome was something that he had never expected. He originally wanted to kidnap the unconscious Feng Xiao, while the Qingtang Kingdom's people were at the main entrance welcoming the bride and the Feng Manor's Phoenix Guards. This way, he could threaten Feng Qingge to hand over the Phoenix Guards and take the Phoenix Guards for his own use. However, he did not expect that while the Phoenix Guards were at odds with the Qing Tang Kingdom's people outside, there were still 8 martial Great Phoenix Guards guarding Feng Zhao's courtyard. Feng Zhao was merely an unconscious cripple. Feng Qingge was indeed very protective of him. Even under such circumstances, he still allowed those 8 martial great masters to guard Feng Zhao's courtyard. However, when he thought of the news reported by his subordinates, his expression became serious again. How could the Feng Manor have 4 golden core cultivators protecting it? How much strength did they have that he did not know about protecting the Feng Manor that was on the verge of collapse? Chapter 445. What do I do? Will they suspect me? He muttered to himself. At this moment, he was feeling uncertain. He originally thought that he could bring Feng Zhao back, but who knew that the defenses of his courtyard would be too strong? The people he brought could not even get close to the room. Fortunately, other than those who died in battle, there were no survivors. Perhaps they would not suspect him. Yes, they have no reason to suspect me. They also have no evidence. I don't need to scare myself. He took a deep breath and calmed his nervous and frightened emotions. Sitting on the dragon throne, it was as if all the strength in his body had been sucked out. Previously, he had been walking around nervously. Now that he sat down, he found that his hands and feet were covered in cold sweat. He did not have the strength to stand. After a long time, he called out. A person in black appeared in the hall.
Master.
The black-robed man bowed respectfully and called out, "Bring back the martial arts great masters that were sent to guard the third prince. Tonight, the palace will be on high alert." He ordered in a low voice. After calming down, his brain began to work. Originally, he was worried that Yi Xian would cause trouble at the Feng Manor today. Thus, he sent a few martial arts great masters to guard him. When he was imprisoned in the manor, he would not be allowed to leave and cause trouble. Fortunately, he sent people to guard him. Otherwise, he was afraid that he would not be able to deal with the series of events today.
Yes.
The person in black in the hall responded and quickly left. Seeing this, Murongbo fell into deep thought. Who exactly was that man called Yama Lord? Why did even the people of Qingtang Kingdom fear him? And he had that kind of strength to be able to kill a nascent soul-old monster. What exactly was his background? What happened at the Feng Manor spread like the wind through the entire Yunhua city. Even though Murong Yixian could not leave the manor, he still heard the news. He sat in the pavilion in the manor and looked in the direction of the Feng Manor. His deep eyes carried a complicated light. Killed a nascent soul? Was that man the one she loved? If not, then she was the one the man loved. Where did she get to know that kind of person? Was it the one she met when she left? Thinking of how she had said that it was impossible between them, he had once naively thought that as long as he cultivated to a certain level, he would definitely be able to make her look at him in a new light. But now, I'm afraid it will never be possible. He smiled bitterly and murmured softly. His expression was desolate and lonely. Perhaps he didn't love her as deeply as she thought. Otherwise, why didn't he try to leave after his father ordered people to guard the palace? Actually, he was very clear in his heart that there were many things that couldn't be had at the same time. Between her and the Murong family, he had resolutely chosen to protect the Murong family's royal family, to not shake the foundation of the country, to not give the Qingtang country a reason to be destroyed. And this was destined to lose her forever. Master, the monarch has withdrawn his men. A black-robed guard came up behind him and reported. Murong Yixian was silent. He sat quietly and didn't say anything. The guard behind him didn't move and didn't leave. He seemed to be hesitating about something. After a long while, Murong Yixian asked, "Is there anything else?" The guard then said, "Today, when the crown prince of Qingtang Kingdom was confronting the eldest young miss of the Feng family, the monarch brought people to break into the Feng family head's courtyard from the back. However, there were 8 martial great masters guarding the courtyard. The monarch didn't succeed and escaped after losing a few people. Chapter 446. He wants to destroy the kingdom that the Murong family's ancestor had built for hundreds of years. His voice was filled with disbelief and anger. He could not imagine and did not understand why he would do such a thing. The Feng Manor had been the Murong family's guardian for generations. Not only did they protect the Murong family, they also protected the country of Glorious Sunday. Now, he wanted to personally destroy this family. Furious, he stood up. With a wave of his sleeve, he strode towards the imperial palace. He did not even have anyone prepare a carriage. Instead, he used his chi to fly over. In less than the time it takes for a stick of incense to burn, he arrived at the imperial palace. When he arrived at the imperial palace, he went straight to the main hall. He saw Murong Bo talking to a few martial great masters. His face sank and he angrily shouted, "What exactly do you want to do? Could it be that you want to destroy everything before you are willing to give up? Do you think that no one knows what you've done? You're indulging in too much fantasy." After Murong Bo heard his words, his face sank. He waved his hand to indicate for everyone in the hall to leave. Only then did he shout, "Are you crazy? Crazy? Huh. I don't think I'm the crazy one. It's you. You've already gone crazy. You must be crazy to want to destroy the Feng family. You must be crazy to want to destroy a family that loyally protects Glorious Sun. Do you think that no one knows what you've done? Do you think that no one knows that you were the one who sent people to assassinate Uncle Xiao? Do you think that the Feng Manor's people wouldn't know that you brought people to kidnap people? Ha 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 ha, my lord father. When did you become so naive?" Murong Yixin laughed mockingly. Looking at his shocked face, he turned around and left. Because of his words, Murong Bo's expression changed greatly. His entire body trembled as he watched him leave. He wanted to call out to him and ask him how he knew that he was the one who sent people to assassinate Feng Xiao. However, he saw that he had already disappeared from the main hall. How could it be? How could he know? I clearly did it very cleanly. How could he know? He muttered, his voice trembling. Do the Feng Manor's people also know? Will they know? After leaving the palace, Murong Yixin's entire being was filled with loneliness and sorrow. He turned around and glanced at the palace. This palace, he thought, would soon cease to exist. For the first time, the people of the Feng Manor endured. They handed over power and retired. Even though Uncle Xiao was unconscious, the Feng Manor did not make any movements. They did not have any plans to deal with the Murong family. This was something that he, who had always observed the Feng family, was very clear on. But this time, he was afraid that it would not be so easy to suppress it. Although he did not know her well, he could tell that she was not someone who would be bullied by others. Otherwise, the people of Qingting Kingdom would not have been taught a lesson time and time again. Suddenly, he felt tired. He didn't want to stay in this country any longer. He didn't want to stay and watch the kingdom be destroyed. He wanted to leave, but he couldn't stop thinking about that person. Originally, he wanted to go to the Feng Manor to see her again, but when he thought of what his father had done, he stopped in his tracks. He paused for a moment and glanced in the direction of the Feng Manor. That glance contained a deep longing and a strong reluctance to part. Even so, he still resolutely walked away. In the Feng Manor, in Fengjiu's courtyard, Guan Shilin was currently telling Fengjiu about the latest information from the black market. Chapter 447. Guan Shilin's voice paused slightly, and he said with some hesitation, "It's just that I never thought that such a small piece of jade would come from a third-tier country like the Yin Kingdom. If it was before, he would never have thought that people from a small ninth-tier country would not be afraid of people from a sixth-tier country. He would never have imagined that they would one day ask about a third-tier country. And it seemed that ever since he met Xiaoju, his life had completely changed. He was even certain that, in the future, he might even be able to enter a first-tier country, let alone a third-tier country. Oh? Then Manager Yin said that it came from a third-tier country, the Yin Kingdom? Fengjiu raised an eyebrow, then nodded. Then it should be. What should be? Guan Shilin asked in surprise. Ever since I found out that grandfather had been kidnapped, I analyzed it. The other person's cultivation was unfathomable, and they were able to easily infiltrate the Feng manor and kidnap grandfather without harming anyone in the manor. From this, I can conclude that the other person will not harm grandfather's life. Someone with that kind of cultivation cannot be from the glorious Sun country, so it should be from another country. Since he's from another country and has that kind of cultivation level and didn't hurt anyone, it's very likely that he's someone grandfather knows. So, after I told father, I went to grandfather's room to look for him. Then, guess what I found? She narrowed her eyes filled with a sly smile. Seeing her expression, Guanshelin was startled. With a strange expression, he said, "Don't tell me you found out who the person who kidnapped grandfather is?" Hee, I didn't. However, I'm certain that grandfather knows them. Look. She took out a scroll from her space and opened it, saying, "Grandfather's room is normally closed off to people. I only noticed this after I searched his room that day." A painting of a beauty? Guanshelin was slightly surprised. This painting was a bit strange. It was a painting of a beauty, but there was not just one beauty. Instead, there was a phoenix accompanying her. However, the strange thing was that when the phoenix flapped its wings to fly away, it was grabbed by the beauty wearing a light green dress in the painting. The beauty's eyes were filled with anger. She looked at the phoenix as it flapped its wings to fly away. Her expression was very realistic, and the painting style was strange. It was different from normal paintings of beauties. Looking at this strange but interesting painting, he grinned. I never thought that grandfather would also collect paintings of beauties. The beauty in this painting is really beautiful. Could it be grandmother's painting from before? But why did he catch a rainbow phoenix? What a strange painting style. I originally thought it was, but I asked father. He said that it wasn't. Even he had never seen the painting. Also, don't you think that this painting has a different meaning? Also, this painting has a spirit map imprint. She chuckled, thinking about the meaning of this painting. The smile on her lips couldn't help but deepen. Hearing this, Guanshelin was stunned. Have a painting of the Yin Kingdom? What is that? Chapter 448. Listening to her explanation, Guanshelin nodded as if he understood. He really didn't know much about the magic of cultivators. He only vaguely knew a bit about it. So, he looked at the painting again and asked, "Then what do you mean by meaning?" Although the style of this painting is a bit strange, it doesn't seem to have any meaning. If it were other birds, it would be fine, but the one in the painting is a phoenix. Think about it. Our Feng family happens to have the surname Feng. I guess, of course, it's just my guess. This phoenix flapping its wings should represent someone from our Feng family. Her eyes were smiling, and there was a hint of curiosity in them. If it was really as she thought, then grandfather's kidnapping would be very interesting. However, all of this was just her guess. The specifics would only be known when the investigation was done. Hearing that she didn't say half of it, Guanshelin was confused. You've been talking for a long time, but I still don't understand. Who exactly kidnapped grandfather? I'm guessing that it has something to do with her. Her finger pointed downwards, landing on a seal at the corner of the ground. Yin Sushi? Seeing these two words, Guanshelin was startled. What does this name mean? Hearing this, Fengjiu glared at him. I say, brother, can't you think about it? Why did grandfather hang this painting in his room? Why was there a phoenix on the portrait of a beauty? In addition to the spirit map imprint, the small words engraved on the seal are Yin Sushi. Also, the jade fragments that fell also point to the Yin country, a third-rate country. Can't you figure it out with so much information? Then grandfather is now in the Yin country, a third-rate country? He was kidnapped by this woman called Sushi? No way, right? Normally, if a woman wanted to kidnap someone, she would kidnap someone younger. However, she actually kidnapped the old man. Why did it seem so strange? Fengjiu put away the painting and said with a smile, "That's why I'm not worried about Grandpa's life. I've also told father about this matter and told him not to worry about Grandpa. When the matter here is settled, I'll find a chance to go there and take a look. Since we know that Grandpa will not be in danger, we can rest assured. However, what about the Yama Lord who lives here now? He didn't seem easy to get along with. How long did he plan to stay here? Don't tell me he wants to take you with him? Guan Shilin had a strange expression on his face. He shuddered at the thought of the majestic, black-robed Yama Lord. That person's coercion was too strong. Just by looking at him from afar, he could feel how terrifying he was, let alone seeing him kill a nascent soul-old monster with his own eyes. Well, that guy is really hard to deal with. Let me tell you, I feel a little guilty facing him because I stole a lot of things from him. Alas, I've done too many shameful things. Now that the creditor is here, my heart is trembling. I don't even have the confidence to speak. She had a helpless expression and her heart was terrified. Thinking of the 1,000-year-old ginseng she stole from him and the things she took from Zhan Bao Pavilion, she felt a little embarrassed. Chapter 449. I heard that he went to Godfather's courtyard. They seemed to be chatting until now. Was there so much to talk about when they had just met? As she spoke, she saw the black-robed figure walking over with his hands behind his back. Guan Shilin looked and said, "He's here. Brother, why don't I go to your place to hide for a few days?" Hearing this, Guan Shilin looked at her and said, "It's better if you don't go. He came all the way here to find you. You can't avoid him." With that, he stood up and grinned. "Xiaojiu, I'll go back first. If there's anything, send someone to call me." As soon as he finished speaking, he quickly walked out of the room without waiting for her reply. When he passed by the Yama King, he cupped his fists and bowed before walking out. Seeing this, Fengjiu sighed inwardly. He could only get up and walk out. Standing at the door, he looked at the Yama Lord and asked, "How long will you be staying here? I'll get someone to arrange a courtyard for you." "Your courtyard is quite good," the Yama Lord said slowly and sat down at the table in the courtyard. "I don't have much to do recently, so I'll stay here for a while. As the host, you should know that you can't neglect your guests. Also, your father said that you should take some time to walk around the city with me and see the scenery and culture of Yunhua City. I'm very busy. I don't have time to stroll around with you. If you're interested, I can find a few people to accompany you." She crossed her arms and leaned against the door. It was obvious that she didn't have time to talk to him. "What else do you need to do? I can do it for you." He looked at her leaning against the door and saw that she was wearing a red dress. Her face was beautiful and her figure was exquisite, but her lazy posture with her arms crossed was like a man's with a bit of unruliness. Her delicate chin was slightly raised, and her face was cold and evil. She was just like a little hooligan. Looking at her like this, he was curious. He didn't understand how she could have such a changeable face. So many different temperaments? They were clearly the same person, but she had to be as elegant as a celestial fairy to be able to bring out that elegant and refined posture. She had to be unrestrained, languid, and wanton to release an enchanting, soul-stirring, and captivating aura. She could be as innocent as a little white rabbit, so harmless that anyone could pounce on her and take a bite out of her. However, she could also be as cunning as a fox, scheming against her enemies and causing them to lose the most miserably when they were least prepared. Her personality was eccentric and perverse. She dared to wear a set of dirty and messy beggar's clothes. She dared to hug the thighs of anyone she met. She was ruthless and merciless towards her enemies. Her movements were strange and varied. She could take people's lives with a smile. But this kind of her somehow caught his eye and entered his heart. Until now, he still couldn't understand what he saw in her. The most hateful thing was that he had already done so much, yet she still had a look of disdain on her face, as if she couldn't wait to avoid him. Every time he thought about it, he was so angry that he wanted to push her down on the bed and teach her a lesson. Just like what happened at noon. Thinking of the scene at noon, his stern, handsome face couldn't help but soften. His thin lips also slightly hooked up into a happy smile. But this appearance of his, in Fengjiu's eyes, became another appearance. He cracked a smile and excitedly spoke. Just as he was about to tell him what he had done tonight, he heard his master's voice come from the room. "Come in." Hearing that deep voice, Hui Lang's gaze turned and asked, "How is master feeling?" After receiving the ghost doctor's orders, he had left the manor to familiarize himself with the route. Thus, he had no idea what had happened in the manor. Won't you know once you go in? Yi did not say anything else and indicated for him to go in. Chapter 451. The Yama Lord drank his wine and asked without raising his head, "What did you do for her?" Hearing this, Hui Lang hurriedly said, "This subordinate took the ghost doctor's medicine to the palace and drugged the Murong Bo to teach him a lesson." "You didn't kill him?" He raised an eyebrow. He thought that she would kill him once she found out that the Murong Bo was behind it, but looking at the situation, it didn't seem to be the case. He shook his head. "No, the ghost doctor said that there was no need to take his life. She has many ways to make him wish he was dead." Actually, he was quite curious about the effects of the medicine. What did it do? Yanju pondered for a long time before he said, "Since she's willing to order you around, you should walk in front of her more often. If she asks you to do something, don't leave any loose ends. Do it for her." Hearing this, Hui Lang was slightly startled, but he still replied, "Yes, you're dismissed."
Yes.
He nodded and walked out of the room with a confused look on his face. Strange, why did Master feel that something was off? Like something was wrong? Could it be that he came back with a stomach full of anger from the ghost doctor? The next morning, he arrived at Fengzhou's courtyard early to wait, but he didn't expect that she didn't wake up early at all. Instead, she opened the door and walked out at noon. "Ghost? Young miss, I finished what you asked me to do last night. I was going to come and tell you, but I saw that you turned off the lights early, so I didn't disturb your rest." He grinned and looked at her dressed in white today. He felt that no matter if it was white or red, she could wear it in her own style. No matter how he looked at her, she was beautiful. Only this kind of person was worthy of his master. Only this kind of person could control his master. He just didn't know. What kind of anger did she give his master yesterday? He asked for half a day last night, but Yi refused to say anything. This made him curious, so he couldn't sleep well. "Did you alert the people around him?" Fengzhou asked as he walked to the table and sat down. "No, I stared at him for a long time before I killed one of his men and replaced him. He didn't even know that I was walking beside him and pouring tea for him. However, I saw that Murong Bo's face didn't look too good. He must have been in a state of fear ever since he returned. With his skills, it was too easy for him to do this." "Very good. Sorry to trouble you." She nodded with satisfaction. "Heh, it's no trouble at all. In the future, if it's inconvenient for you to appear or take action, you can leave it to me." "All right, young miss, what exactly is the effect of that medicine? Can it really make people wish they were dead?" His face was full of curiosity. Because he wasn't very proficient in pharmacology, he really didn't know what the medicine in the bottle was for. "If you want to know, why don't you go take a look yourself tonight?" She curled her lips into a smile, and the smile on her lips was a bit strange and cold. After Murong Bo took the medicine, he won't let the news spread. However, paper can't wrap fire. This matter can't be suppressed for long. I really want to see how he will take action against my Feng Manor when he can't even protect himself. Chapter 452. Just as Hui Lang had expected, at this moment, Murong Bo's palace was in a state of tension and solemnity. The monarch, Murong Bo, who was still fine last night, could not get up this morning. Not only that, his head of hair had all fallen out and was as smooth as a mirror, as if there was not even a blade of grass growing on it. As for Murong Bo, who was originally middle-aged and had a perfect appearance, it was as if his life force had been sucked out of him overnight. He rapidly aged, and in just one night, he turned from a middle-aged man around 40 to a middle-aged man around 50. The skin on his face and body had aged overnight, as if it had been sucked dry by something. The most shocking thing was that his cultivation had also fallen from a martial great master to a great martial master overnight. This sudden change was very strange. No one could find the reason, and no one had the ability to treat it. At the same time, Murong Bo was extremely shocked. "If you can't find the reason, I'll cripple you." He shouted angrily and lifted his leg to kick a doctor who was kneeling in front of him. That doctor did not dare to dodge and took the kick directly. He fell to the ground and wiped off his cold sweat. It was too unbelievable in one night. The monarch's hair had all fallen out and his strength had fallen by a level. Furthermore, it did not seem to have stopped and seemed to be continuing to decline. Whether it was his life force, his cultivation, or his life force, they were all disappearing. This made them, who had never encountered such a situation, tremble with fear and panic. It was one thing if one person could not diagnose it, but if a group of people could not diagnose it, then it was a nameless disease. Could it be that the monarch was worried? Otherwise, why would it become like this? An old man who was kneeling at the side steadied his emotions and said calmly, "Monarch, please calm down. According to our diagnosis, the monarch does not show any signs of being poisoned, and your pulse is normal. For this to happen so suddenly, perhaps the monarch is worried about the country's affairs. Perhaps the monarch is relaxed and your body will gradually recover." Gradually recover? Morong Bo's face was gloomy, and there was an unconcealable fear in his eyes. He scolded with a trembling voice, "You trash! Don't you see that I'm getting older every second? Can't you see that my cultivation base is dispersing with every passing second? Gradually recover? Do you want me to sit here and wait for death?" The dozen or so doctors did not dare to respond. All of them were kneeling with their heads lowered, not daring to raise their heads. They had never seen such a diagnosis before. How could they treat it? "Monarch, why don't we issue an imperial notice to search for the whereabouts of the ghost doctor? With the ghost doctor's talent in medicine, she will definitely be able to diagnose the crux of the problem." A doctor boldly suggested. "Scram! Get out of here! Useless thing!" Morong Bo shouted angrily, grabbing the things at hand and throwing them at them. "You want me to post the imperial ranking list? Wouldn't that be telling the world that he, the monarch, was no good? At that time, there would be no need for the other countries to invade. Once the people below them turned over, there would be nothing left. There must be a reason for everything. It can't be like this for no reason. There must be a reason. Let me think. He forced himself to calm down. From yesterday until today, what he had done, what he had eaten, what he had touched, he recalled it all in his mind, but the fear in his heart was too great. His heart was a mess, and he had no way of calming himself down to think carefully. However, he was certain that this matter was definitely related to the people of the Feng Manor. Chapter 453. Thinking of this, his heart trembled and he suddenly shouted, "Guards! Guards!" A guard in black rushed in, not daring to look at the person above. Instead, he respectfully knelt on one knee and said, "Master, go to the palace immediately and call Li Xian over." He tried his best to calm himself down, but his trembling voice still revealed his fear. "Yes." The man in black responded and quickly left. "It must be them. But when did they do it? I'm surrounded by my trusted aides," he muttered in a panic. Speaking of this, his voice paused, as if he suddenly remembered something. He clenched his fists and shouted, "Guards! Guards!" Several men in black came in and the trembling voice said, "Count the number of people for me. See if there's anyone missing. Quickly. Immediately." Yes. Several people responded and quickly retreated. They counted all their people. When one person was missing, the person counting was startled. He counted again, and after confirming, he quickly reported to his superiors. "Master, we're missing one person." As expected. He stumbled back a few steps, his face full of shock and understanding. At this time, the shadow guard who had been sent out from the palace came back to report, "Master, according to the people in the palace, the third prince did not return home yesterday. The people they sent out could not find his whereabouts in the city. The people at the city gate said that they saw the third prince leave the city and did not know where he went." Hearing this, Morong Bo's entire body went limp on the ground. His mind was completely blank. His originally aged person seemed to have aged 10 years at this moment. He sat on the ground, his eyes empty as he looked forward, unable to speak for a long time. Seeing this, the people in the palace looked at each other and silently retreated. Although Morongbo wanted to seal off the news of him losing his cultivation and aging face still spread. Moreover, the news of Murong Ishien's departure also gradually spread. When they heard this news, the undercurrent in Cloud Moon City, which was not considered peaceful to begin with, began to surge again. In the Feng Manor, the courtyard where the Yama Lord lived. Hiss. Let me tell you, you don't know how frightened I was when I saw that scene. I almost couldn't help but scream. You definitely can't imagine that the person who was fine the day before had turned into an old man in his 50s or 60s the next day. Hui Lang was talking to Ying Yi in the courtyard. The scariest thing is that his cultivation level is going to be crippled. If it were to disappear gradually, that would be truly devastating. Even if he was a martial great master, he would have to have trained hard for dozens of years. If it were to be destroyed just like that, tsk. Indeed, the ghost doctor's medicine is extraordinary. That's why I say that you can offend anyone but the ghost doctor. Ying's eyes flashed when he heard this. He had seen the ghost doctor's methods before, but he didn't expect there to be such a strange medicine that could make people age day by day. His strength and cultivation were gradually disappearing. Indeed, it could make one wish for death. One would live in fear and extreme panic. Compared to killing him with a single slash, such a method would make him wish for death even more. However, that Baldy's medicine was given by me. I originally wanted to cripple him, but thinking of the ghost doctor's words, sigh, I didn't do it, he said with some regret. As for that Morong Bo, if it were him, he would have finished him off with a single slash. Chapter 454. Hearing this, Ingy glanced into the room and said in a low voice, he's probably waiting for the ghost doctor to finish her work and think of him before coming out. His master's mood was not good. As subordinates, their skin was a bit more tense. Only Hui Lang dared to be happy these past 2 days. He did not even dare to smile. Waiting for the ghost doctor to think of him? Hui Lang had a strange expression and said, compared to this, I feel that Master should go to the ghost doctor's courtyard and walk around in front of her. Waiting for the ghost doctor to think of Master? To put it bluntly, Master would probably wait and wait until the ghost doctor forgot about him. Ingy glanced at him and suggested, how about you go in and give Master some advice? Me again? Hui Lang glared. Don't be too evil. How can you suggest that I do all sorts of bad things? If you have the guts, go yourself. I won't go. If you don't go to Master's place, you can go to the ghost doctor's place. Ying continued, haven't you been going to the ghost doctor's place a lot these past 2 days? Say a few good things about Master in front of her and remind her. Perhaps she will come over. Hearing this, Hui Lang said, although I've been going to the ghost doctor's place a lot these past few days, I haven't seen her much. She seems to be very busy. Also, if she's not giving orders to the Phoenix Guards, she's cultivating in her room and doesn't let anyone disturb her. Even if I wanted to say a few good things about Master, I didn't have the chance. As he said this, he seemed to have thought of something and asked, isn't Master chatting with the Feng family's head quite well? Why didn't you go these past 2 days? Building a good relationship with his future father-in-law was very important. Moreover, it was rare for them to be in the Feng Manor. With this kind of opportunity, they could not miss it. The Feng family's head has been cultivating in seclusion these past 2 days. Master naturally did not disturb her. Ying said, oh, so it's like that. Hui Lang nodded. Thinking a bit, he said, then I'll go take a look at the ghost doctor's place. You should advise Master to not always stay in his room and cultivate. While we're staying in the Feng Manor, we must take advantage of this opportunity. As he spoke, he walked out to check on the situation at Fengju. In the room, the Yama Lord was not cultivating. Instead, he was listening to the conversation between the 2 people outside. He thought about it. He had already come all the way here. Could it be that he couldn't swallow his pride and get closer to her? That woman was so unromantic. Didn't he already know that? Why was he being so serious with her? Perhaps, the more serious he was and the less he went to look for her, the happier she would be. When he thought of this, his eyes darkened, and he snorted coldly, "Humph! You want to cast me aside? You won't have a chance." After making up his mind, he got up and walked out of the room. When Ing saw him come out, he immediately stepped forward and bowed. "Master." "Okay," the Yama Lord replied and walked out without stopping. As he walked towards Fengjiu's courtyard, he bumped into Hui Lang, who was on his way back. "Master, eldest young miss is not in the courtyard. I heard that she went to the back of the mountain." Hearing this, a dark light flashed through his eyes. He was a bit surprised. Back of the mountain? Didn't the phone guards retreat to the back of the mountain? What did she go there for? Chapter 455. Hearing this, Yama Lord clasped his hands behind his back and stood still for a moment before walking towards the back of the mountain. He wasn't going to help, so he was going to see what she was doing. After knowing her for so long, he should already know that she was such a strong-willed person. She planned to handle everything by herself. Since that was the case, he would just watch from the side. That's right, the world is so big, and there are so many strong people that she can't know. She is a person who wants to leave this small ninth-ranked country. It is impossible for him to protect her all the time. If he really protects her all the time, she is afraid that in the future, she will suffer even more. Thinking of this, he pursed his lips. His eyes were dark, and he felt an indescribable discomfort in his heart. At the same time, in the back of the mountain, at this time, Fengjiu called all the Phoenix guards in front of her for the first time. It was also the first time she had them appear in front of her like this. Looking at the guards in front of her, as well as the 8 team leaders standing in front of each team, her voice was cold as she spoke. "This is the first time I have gathered all of you for a lecture since I took over the Phoenix guards. Every one of you has been groomed by the Feng family and are the most outstanding guards that were carefully selected. Some of you have followed my father and killed hundreds of enemies. I have never doubted your loyalty, but..." All the Phoenix guards felt their hearts rise. Hearing her say the word, "but," she stopped and did not continue speaking. Everyone could not help but hold their breaths. Their gazes fell on her, wanting to see what she would say next. In regards to this new master, they did not have a deep understanding of her. It could even be said that they only had an impression of her from that day in front of the Feng Manor's gates. After something happened to the Feng Manor's master and family head, they even began to question her strength. However, after the confrontation with the Qing Tang Kingdom that day, they knew that their master was not as weak and incompetent as the outside world said. On the contrary, the scene of her decisively killing the general sent by the country head was deeply imprinted in their minds. How could someone who dared to act like that be weak and incompetent? Don't joke around. If she was really weak and incompetent, their team leaders would not respect her as master. However, it seemed that aside from Luo Yu, although the other team leaders kept calling her master, none of them had recognized her as their master. Thinking of this, a strange expression appeared on their faces. They all looked at the team leaders in front of them. Fengjiu glanced at everyone, and her clear voice spoke again. "However, I need you to recognize me as your master again. Swear an oath to the heavens and earth. Swear that you will only be loyal to me and never betray the Feng family." Hearing this, everyone's expression, "Swear to the heavens and earth?" They knew about this kind of oath. Using the Xian energy in one's body to sense the power of heaven and earth to make an oath contract. Once this oath was made, if there was any betrayal, even without the master's punishment, heaven and earth would punish the traitor with heavenly lightning. Although they were the Phoenix guards, they had never made their master to make such an oath. What? Could it be that she did not have enough trust them? Thinking of this, their expressions changed slightly. It was not that they were unwilling, but they felt that it was a little strange. Since he did not doubt their loyalty, why did he have to do this? A Phoenix guard who had already received the medicinal pill raised the medicinal pill in his hand in surprise. "This is a medicinal pill, and there are even medicinal pill patterns on it." Hiss. Just how many medicinal pills were there? Master, where did all these come from? They sucked in a breath of cold air, feeling incredulous. In a small ninth-grade country like theirs, potions were extremely rare, let alone something as rare as a pill. You still don't know, right? My other identity is the ghost doctor. In the future, you won't be lacking in things like potions and medicinal pills, Fengju said with a smile. His faint voice made all the Phoenix Guards' hearts beat wildly. Chapter 457. At this moment, they finally understood why even those golden core cultivators would recognize their master as their master. To be able to refine so many pills, how terrifying was their master's alchemy skills. Perhaps many alchemists couldn't compare to her. At this moment, they couldn't help but think that since the mounts and pets by their master's side were so extraordinary, could it be that their master had been feeding them pills or medicines? Otherwise, how could that round snow-white pet suddenly become bigger than a lion? That ferocious appearance was even more ferocious than a ferocious beast. As for that old white, they couldn't understand how it saved their master from the hands of a peak martial arts grandmaster. However, from the looks of it now, it should have eaten a lot of pills or medicine refined by their master. After receiving the pills with excitement, they each held the pills and sized them up. Looking at the pill patterns on the pills, they didn't know what grade they were. However, after hearing from their master that there were 4 golden core cultivators around to protect them, they all sat down cross-legged, consumed the pills, and began to cultivate. Fengjiu glanced at the Phoenix Guards who began to cultivate after consuming the pills, then instructed Long Shuang and Long Hua to return to the residence to take care of the affairs. After all, her father was also advancing recently, and now the Phoenix Guards were the same, so some of the trivial matters in the residence couldn't be left unattended. These days, her pills were all refined in the space. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been able to rush out so many pills for the Phoenix Guards to use. Moreover, that Murong Bo was about to lose his cool and should be making a move in the next 2 days. As she walked, she saw the 3 figures not far in front of her. When she saw them, her eyes moved slightly, and a smile appeared on her beautiful face. Yama Lord, why are you here? She heard that this guy hadn't gone out for the past few days, so she thought that he would stay in that room. She didn't expect that he would run out today. Sigh. Actually, she really wanted to say that he should stay in that courtyard for a few more days, because she really couldn't stand the fiery gaze he had when he looked at her. He was really afraid that one day, she wouldn't be able to hold herself back and directly pounce on him and eat him up. The Yama Lord didn't know what she was thinking. When he saw the smile on her face and the way her eyes curved, he had long forgotten what she had said about him being amorous. His heart also soared when he saw her and the smile on her face. Even so, he still maintained a cold and indifferent attitude. After glancing at her indifferently, he looked at the surrounding scenery. He opened his mouth and said, "This monarch has nothing to do, so I decided to take a walk in the back mountain." Oh, so that's how it was. Then please continue. I won't disturb your mood. She nodded her head in realization and was about to leave with a smile. Who knew that she would hear that low voice with a hint of anger in it? I'm not in the mood now. She shrunk her neck and looked away. She pretended not to hear him and lightened her footsteps. She sped up, intending to walk past him. She didn't want to be stuck with this guy. Chapter 458. Fengjiu rubbed her nose and looked up at him. She smiled and asked, Yama Lord, is there anything else? This lord has been here for a few days, but you haven't done your duty as a host. Shouldn't you take a day out to accompany this lord? He said in a low voice, his deep eyes staring at her. If one listened carefully, they would be able to hear the hidden bitterness in his voice, as if he was a resentful husband who was left alone in an empty room. Ha! Seeing her smile embarrassedly and her eyes darting around, as if she was thinking of something, he immediately interrupted her and threatened. Don't you dare find another excuse for this lord. Hearing this, Fengjiu's mouth twitched. She glanced at him and smiled. Yama Lord, you're thinking too much. I just wanted to say that I'll go back and change my clothes to accompany you. Hearing this, the Yama Lord's expression softened. He glanced at her red clothes and said, "These clothes look good." What he meant was, "I think they look good, so there's no need to change." How can that be? I'm going out with the Yama Lord. How can I not dress up? Hee hee, don't worry. I won't refuse to go. I'll go back and change my clothes. It won't take long. You can wait for me in the front hall. The Yama Lord frowned, but didn't say anything else. He only said, "This lord will wait for you in your courtyard." He had been tricked so many times that he found it unbelievable that she would agree to accompany him so quickly. That's fine. Fangzhou smiled in response, then walked back with him. Seeing the two of them walk back, Huilang and Yingyi looked at each other. Huilang asked, "What do you think the ghost doctor is up to? Is she really going out with Master? Why do I feel like she's up to something again? Didn't you hear Master say to wait in her courtyard? He shouldn't be fooled again," Yingyi said, and followed the two people in front of him. Seeing this, Huilang also followed. But in his heart, he was thinking, if other people said this, he wouldn't think too much. But this ghost doctor, it's hard to say. After returning to the courtyard, Fangzhou asked someone to serve the Yama Lord a pot of tea while he went into his room to change his clothes. Huilang and Yingyi arrived behind the Yama Lord and waited. The two of them noticed that ever since the ghost doctor said that she wanted to accompany Master out for a walk, Master's lips had always carried a faint smile. He probably didn't know how gentle and happy his expression was right now. She was clearly drinking tea, but when she took a sip and turned her head to look at the tightly shut door, the two people behind her looked at the sky speechlessly. He felt that his master was now like a young boy, so excited that he couldn't find his limits. The ghost doctor had only said that she wanted to accompany him for a walk, and he was already this excited. If it was the wedding night in the future, how excited would he be? Just thinking about it, they couldn't help but worry for him. They originally thought that Master and the ghost doctor had eaten her up in the room that day, but looking at the way the two of them interacted these past few days, they knew that Master didn't succeed. If he succeeded, would he be like this? AI. Meeting a master who wasn't very open about relationships, they, as subordinates, were really anxious. Chapter 459. Master, don't worry. The longer the ghost doctor dresses up, the more it proves that she cares about you. Isn't there a saying? A woman dresses up for the one she loves. She's dressing up for Master. Otherwise, she wouldn't have specially come back to change clothes just to accompany Master. Hearing this, Lord Yan's heart skipped a beat uncontrollably. His hand that was holding the cup of tea trembled imperceptibly. A light flashed across his deep black eyes as he looked towards the room. He thought to himself, "Is she really dressing up for me? That's right. Otherwise, why would she come back to change clothes just to accompany me?" As the saying goes, a woman dresses up for the one she loves. Does this mean that she cares about me? That's right. Women usually don't mean what they say. Even if they like someone, they won't admit it. I know. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but look forward to it. Seeing that his master had returned to his usual calm and indifferent self, Huilang grinned and stepped back. He raised his chin towards Yingyi as if to say, "How was it? I'm smart now, aren't I?" He chose the words that his master liked to hear the most. Yingyi glanced at him but didn't say anything. Perhaps Huilang's words were effective. After waiting for a while, Yama Lord was in a good mood as he drank his tea. After a long time, he heard the door creak open. His heart skipped a beat, and he instinctively looked towards the door. His heart was filled with anticipation. However, when he saw the person who walked out, the corner of his mouth twitched imperceptibly. Suddenly, all the anticipation and joy disappeared, leaving only a stifled feeling. His gaze moved away from Fangzhou and coldly glanced at Huilang behind him. When Huilang saw Fangzhou walk out, his mouth was slightly agape and his face was full of shock. Especially when he sensed his master's cold gaze, he felt a chill run down his spine. He couldn't help but shiver as he complained in his heart. Because of this, he bitterly looked at Fangzhou and asked, "Eldest miss, why did you change into these clothes?" Changing clothes was one thing, but what was with the makeup on her face? If he knew this would happen, he wouldn't have said anything just now. Is my outfit not good enough? Fengju lowered her head to take a look. He was wearing a moon-white male robe, and his ink-black hair was tied up. He had the appearance of an elegant and noble young master. She felt that he was quite good-looking. The clothes are quite nice, but it doesn't seem to match with your thick black eyebrows. She had a perfectly good face, yet she was able to change it into a completely different one. Not only did his master feel stifled when he saw her, even he felt stifled when he saw her. How could he still be able to shop properly? What do you think? She looked at the expressionless Yama Lord with a smile and found that his face seemed to be tense again. The Yama Lord glanced at her and pursed his thin lips. As long as you think it's good. I think it's good. Let's go. I'll accompany you shopping today and won't be back until nightfall. She straightened her crescent moon robe, then took out a fan from her waist and opened it with a swish. With one hand behind her back and the other in front of her body, she gently fanned herself and walked out with large strides. Chapter 460. After leaving the manor, the Yama Lord put on his mask. Behind him was Huilang and Ying-yi. Behind Fengjiu was Long Hua, and Lung Shuang remained in the manor. The group walked out. Because of their outstanding temperaments, they attracted the gazes of the women on the street. However, there were some people who recognized the masked Yama Lord as the person who had killed the nascent soul cultivator in front of the Feng Manor's gates. Thus, they did not dare get too close. They could only watch from a distance and quietly discuss. Fengjiu did not pay attention to the gazes of the citizens in the city. Instead, he smiled and said to the Yama Lord beside him, "There's a place in the city that makes pretty good kanji. How about we eat some kanji before strolling around?" Hearing this, the Yama Lord knew that she had not eaten in the morning. Thus he nodded. Lead the way. It's just up ahead. We'll reach it once we turn around a large street," she said with a smile and led them toward the kanji stall. It was a kanji stall on the corner of the street. The stall was owned by an old couple. Normally, there would only be 3 to 5 people eating there. Perhaps it was because it was already close to noon, but there were not many people there. The Yama Lord and Fengju sat at one table. Huilang, Ying-yi, and Long Hua sat at another table. They each ordered a pot of 100 fresh kanji. The stall owner saw that there was still business even when they were about to close, so he smiled and gave them a few side dishes. "Try it." She scooped a bowl for him and placed it in front of him. "It's even better with the side dishes." The Yama Lord glanced at her. Seeing that she had scooped a bowl for him, he also scooped a bowl for her. "Eat. If it's not enough, we'll order another pot." Seeing him scoop the kanji for her, her eyes flashed slightly, but when she heard what he said, she could not help but smile. "It's good enough if we can finish one pot for 2 people. Also, there are many side dishes in the city. The thing we don't have to worry about the most is food." As she spoke, she picked up some side dishes and ate the 100 fresh porridge. She had indeed not eaten anything early in the morning. She had originally wanted to return to the courtyard to eat after settling the matters with the Phoenix guards, but who knew that she would run into him? Since they wanted to go shopping, then let's go shopping. Seeing that she was eating happily, the Yama Lord also ate a few mouthfuls and helped her put some side dishes in her bowl. In the end, the small pot of porridge was about 4 or 5 bowls. Except for the bowl that he ate, she ate the rest. "Are you full?" "Yes, I'm full." She touched her stomach. She was indeed full after eating a pot of porridge. Moreover, she didn't feel like moving after eating. Burp. She burped and smiled embarrassedly. "Let's go for a walk and digest the food." Chapter 461. Behind him, Huilang and Ying-yi looked at the building in front of them and couldn't help but have a bad feeling in their hearts. Why was the decoration of this building so similar to Ran Xiang's little brothel? This couldn't be a brothel, right? Thinking of this, his lips moved and his expression turned strange. He wanted to speak, but seeing his master's expectant expression, he couldn't help but shut his mouth. Looking towards the ghost doctor, he saw that her face was filled with excitement. Seeing this, he couldn't help but glance at Ingi. Seeing that he was also staring at the building, his expression deep in thought. He raised his sleeve to wipe away the cold sweat on his forehead, hoping that he had only guessed wrongly. How about bringing Master to visit a brothel? He really didn't dare to imagine what kind of expression his master would have when he went in. This kind of idea was something that most people wouldn't be able to think of, but when it came to the ghost doctor, who had a strange personality, this kind of strange thing was very normal. He knew it. How could the ghost doctor agree so easily to accompany his master to stroll around for the whole day? So, she was waiting for his master here. Could it be that she thought that by sending a few beauties to his master would stop thinking about her? One had to know that when it came to beauties, the beauties in Yin Palace's beauty brothel weren't any less than the beauties outside, but he hadn't seen his master have any thoughts about any of them. If his master could be sent away with just a few beauties, he wouldn't have come all the way here to the ghost doctor's place. Speaking of which, he really found it strange. What did his master see in the ghost doctor? In terms of beauty, although she was extremely beautiful, but to them who were used to seeing all kinds of beauties, beauty really wasn't worth mentioning. In terms of cultivation talent, there were so many women who were more talented than the ghost doctor. Because she knew how to refine pills and make medicine, that was even more impossible. His master wasn't that kind of superficial person. How could he fall in love with her because of that, and fall in love with her? Did his master really fall in love with her sly fox-like personality and her crafty and strange methods? Thinking of this, the corner of his mouth couldn't help but twitch. His master should have masochistic tendencies. The more he suffered from the ghost doctor, the more he wanted to pounce on her.
Master.
Suddenly, Ingi's voice pulled him back from his reverie. He glanced at Ingi beside him and saw him clutching his stomach with one hand. A look of discomfort on his face. This subordinate has eaten something bad. Can you allow this subordinate to leave first? The Yama Lord glanced at him and said, "Go." "Thank you, master." As soon as Ingi finished speaking, he turned around and quickly left. Grey Wolf couldn't help but be dumbfounded by this scene. Was this kid trying to slip away? Just as he was thinking about whether or not he should learn from him and slip away, he saw that the ghost doctor had already brought his master inside. Seeing this, he could only bitterly follow behind. Perhaps it was because the place had been cleared, but there was no noise in the building. There was only a beautiful woman in her 30s holding a fan of beauty in her hand. She swayed her hips and slender waist as she walked up to welcome them. When the young masters arrived, the ladies in the building were already prepared. Just now, there were a few who were asking why the young masters hadn't arrived yet. The beautiful woman was wearing a translucent red muslin dress, showing off her ample buttocks and slender waist, as well as her snow-white breasts that looked as if they were about to jump out. Her entire person looked very provocative. She held a red handkerchief in one hand and gently flicked it at Fengjiu's body, while the other hand used a fan to cover half of her red lips. Her laughter made Hui Lang, who was standing behind the Yama Lord, have goosebumps all over his body. Chapter 462. At this time, Yama Lord looked at this scene, but his face was livid, and his whole body was filled with murderous intent. Suddenly, the procuress who still wanted to come forward froze in place, and she couldn't even laugh anymore. He stared at Fengjiu with a dark face, gritted his teeth and asked, "Is this the highlight you said?" "Hey, not this, it's the ones behind." As if she didn't see his anger, she lifted her chin and motioned him to look at the graceful women who were coming down from the second floor. She said, "I spent a lot of money to let the brothel keeper pick some artists. See if there's anyone pleasing to your eyes." Yama Lord resisted the urge to strangle her. He stared at her, flicked his sleeves, and went out. "Young master," the girls quickly came down and surrounded them. When Long Hua saw this, he immediately shouted and pointed at Hui Lang. "He's the boss, he's rich." Grey Wolf felt goosebumps all over his body when he heard the brothel keeper's ecstatic voice. He rubbed his arms and was about to follow after his master when he was surrounded by more than a dozen women dressed in tulle. Their voluptuous and slender bodies pressed against him, and a burst of seductive breeze assaulted his nostrils. He only felt his head rumble, and a wave of heat rushed up to his head. His face instantly turned red. "Don't touch me. Go away. Don't come over. Go away." He was surrounded by a dozen or so women with exquisite figures. Some of them hugged his waist and groped his body. Some of them wrapped their arms around his neck and moved closer to his face. Some of them grabbed his hand and pressed it against a certain soft place. He only felt that his entire body was unwell in an instant. "Go away." This angry shout contained the pressure of spiritual power. As soon as the voice came out, the pressure spread out like water ripples. In an instant, the women hanging around his waist were shaken out. For a time, screams of pain sounded in the building. You actually want to destroy my innocence." Hui Lang almost howled like a wolf. He had never encountered such a situation before, and his entire face was flushed red. He was hugged and hugged by more than a dozen women, and some even grabbed his hand to press on their soft breasts. They were simply too shameless. It was that time when he was punished by his master to go to the small brothel and was forced by that brat Ren Xiang to change into a thin veil. However, it was only for viewing and was not allowed to be touched. Unlike these women here, each one of them was like a hungry wolf pouncing on its prey. These people were too scary. He was a dignified golden core cultivator, but he was actually taken advantage of by these brothel girls. Just thinking about it made him want to kill them. He glared angrily at Long Hua, who was standing at the side. It was all his fault. If it wasn't for his shout, those women wouldn't have all thrown themselves at him. Then, he looked at Fengjiu and wanted to get angry, but in the end, he just said, "You've hurt my master's heart too much. He's serious about you." With that, he turned and left. He just couldn't understand. His master was so outstanding. So why wasn't the ghost doctor moved? His master had already stepped forward and put down his face time and time again, but she pushed him away time and time again. A woman's heart was really like a needle at the bottom of the sea. It was impossible to guess or touch. He could only pity his master and him, who had been taken advantage of. Watching them leave, Long Hua took out some silver and bribed them, then walked out of the brothel with Fengjiu. Seeing that his master's expression was not as indifferent as before, his heart clenched. Chapter 463. He knew that the Yama Lord was very outstanding. That day, when the Yama Lord was chatting with the family head, he had been there the entire time. He could tell that he loved his master very much because every time he mentioned his master, his expression would be gentle. Although he did not know why his master had pushed away the Yama Lord and refused to accept his feelings, he believed that his master had her reasons. "Let's go back," Fengjiu said as she walked towards the Feng Manor. Returning to the courtyard, Long Shuang came out to welcome her. Seeing that it was only Fengjiu and Long Hua, he asked, "Has master eaten? Do you need the kitchen to prepare food?" "No need. Have someone prepare water. I want to bathe." She walked inside, leaving Long Shuang and Long Hua outside. Long Shuang gestured to Long Hua, and the siblings walked out of the courtyard. Without waiting for Long Shuang to speak, Long Hua, who knew what she wanted to ask, said, "Master's mood isn't too good. Sister, take care of her carefully. If master doesn't say anything, don't ask." Hearing this, Long Shuang was slightly surprised, but he still nodded. I understand. I'll have someone prepare water for master to bathe." After saying this, he turned and left. Long Hua glanced at the main room in the courtyard before silently standing guard outside. Not long after, the room had someone prepare hot water. Fengjiu took off her clothes and entered the tub to bathe. She leaned against the side of the tub and slightly raised her head. Through the mist and steam, she looked at the ceiling and slowly closed her eyes. In the depths of her memories, a matter that she did not want to recall was once again brought up by today's chaotic state of mind. That was something that had happened in the 21st century. To the current her, it was something from her previous life. but in her heart, it was as if it had happened yesterday. As the head of the modern hidden sex, she had been trained differently from normal people. While other children were in kindergarten at the age of 6, she was already learning how to assassinate. While she was still doing experiments in other people's laboratories, she was already known as the perverted ghost doctor. She had been different from ordinary people since she was young. Because she was not an ordinary person, she yearned to be an ordinary person. That was until she was 15 years old when she received an assassination mission. The person she was to assassinate was a 23-year-old man who was a genius in the medical field. He was also a man who was as gentle as the warm sun. At that time, after memorizing the information of the prey, she wanted to investigate it because she never killed innocent people. She just didn't expect that because she wanted to understand him, she would end up together with him. Now that he thought of it, he couldn't help but want to laugh. Back then, when she was trying to get close to him, she had also directly latched onto him like that. That man knew that she did it on purpose, but he still brought her home. Later on, she asked him why he had allowed her to stick to him in the first place. He smiled gently and looked at her with eyes full of gentleness and affection, but he didn't say anything. Because she was afraid that her identity would scare him, she had been an obedient girl in the 3 years they were together. She was an ordinary young girl. She went to school, went home, and went shopping. They even agreed that the two of them would get married once she became of age. However, she didn't expect that when she received a call from their laboratory that day, she would receive news that he was about to die. When she rushed over, she only saw him give her an apologetic and reluctant smile. Chapter 464. She suppressed her panicked heart and took a deep breath to calm herself down. Back then, he had died very suddenly. Others had said that he had died because he had come into contact with a poisonous gas during his research. However, when she had tried to investigate his death, she had found out that it was a woman from their laboratory who had done it for the sake of fighting for the right to conduct research abroad. The right to conduct research abroad? She had actually plotted to kill him for such a laughable reason. She had not sent that woman to prison for the country to plant. Instead, she had brought her back to the secret order's secret prison and had used a year to slowly torture her to death. How could she not torture someone to death for daring to lay a hand on one of her people? She suddenly opened her eyes at the thought of this, and a cold light shot out from her eyes. It's her. The person who had transmigrated into Su Ruoyun's body was her. It was the woman who had been tortured to death by her in her past life. Her memories did not contain any details about Su Ruoyun, but Feng Qingge's memories did. Damn it! Why did I only think of this now? She cursed softly as her eyes filled with an eerie murderous intent. If she had known that Su Ruoyun was that woman from her past life, she would not have let her die so easily. However, how had that woman transmigrated into this place? Furthermore, she had arrived here before me? She furrowed her brows at the thought of her, and her heart trembled. She had arrived, and that woman had arrived as well. Then, could he be here as well? Her heart began to thump fiercely at the thought of this possibility. However, she quickly tossed the thought aside. How could there be so many possibilities in this world? That kind of thing could never happen. Master, is the water too cold? Should I add some hot water? Lung Shuang's voice could be heard from outside. Feng Qingge, who had been standing guard outside, had noticed that she had been soaking in the tub for a long time without letting anyone in to pour her some water. She was worried that she had been soaking for too long, so she had asked this question. There's no need. She composed herself and rose from the tub. She then grabbed a towel and wiped the water off her body before putting on her clothes. She then walked into the room and said, "You can let someone in to pour the water now?" "Yes," Lung Shuang replied. Only then did he let the two maidservants go in to pour out the water and put the bathtub into another room. "Master, the kitchen has stewed bird's nest for you. Eat it before you rest." Lung Shuang came in with a bowl of bird's nest. Seeing her sitting on the bed, he brought the bird's nest to the bedside. Fangjiu, who originally wanted to tell her to just eat it, looked up and saw a trace of worry in her eyes. Seeing this, she smiled and said, "It's okay. I'm fine. I'm just in a bad mood." I feel much better after taking a bath." As she spoke, she took the bird's nest and slowly ate it. Seeing this, Long Shuang's worried heart gradually relaxed. After she finished eating, he put the bowl back on the tray and said, "Mistress, rest early." That's right, Luo Yu and the others came over in the evening. They said that the strength of the Phoenix Guards has increased by several stages. Even their strength has increased. Okay, got it. She nodded and gestured for her to leave. Long Shuang bowed and walked out with the tray. As soon as she walked out, she saw Long Hua being pulled by Hui Lang to a small path not far away. The two of them were talking about something. Seeing this, she walked over and called out, "Ah Hua, sister." Long Hua quickly walked back and asked, "Did mistress eat the bird's nest?" "Yes, I ate it." Long Shuang glanced at Hui Lang and said to Long Hua, "You should go back and rest early. I'll keep watch here." Chapter 465. My master is asleep. If there's anything else, we can talk about it tomorrow. Lung Shuang said, letting Lung Hua go back to rest first. When Hui Lang heard this, he thought about how he had been taken advantage of by those women tonight. He immediately became angry and said, "Your master is asleep, but my master can't sleep." His master had been sitting there since he came back, his entire body emitting a murderous aura. He didn't dare approach him. Looking at him like this, he didn't need to think about sleeping tonight. He probably wouldn't be able to sleep with a belly full of anger. What does being unable to sleep have to do with my master? I'm warning you, my master is in a bad mood. Don't bother him. Lung Shuang coldly said these words and handed the tray to a passing servant girl. He himself returned to the courtyard to stand guard. Hui Lang, who had been full of anger, felt strange when he heard these words. The ghost doctor was in a bad mood? Why was she in a bad mood? How could she be in a bad mood? Could it be that she regretted taking his master to the brothel? But when this thought appeared, he remembered that he always thought too much. In order to prevent himself from thinking too much, he followed behind Lung Shuang and asked, "Why is she in a bad mood? Who made her angry?" Lung Shuang ignored him, but when he saw that they were about to reach the courtyard, he was afraid that he would disturb his master's rest. He stopped and turned around to stare coldly at him. "She's been in a bad mood ever since she came back. Lung Hua said that she didn't eat anything tonight. When I asked her when she came back, she said she didn't eat. She just drank half a bowl of bird's nest. You're asking me why she's in a bad mood? I should be the one asking you what's going on." Her voice was cold, and she stared expressionlessly at Hui Lang. For a moment, Hui Lang couldn't help but take a few steps back. It wasn't that he was afraid of her. It was just that when he looked at her exquisite figure, even though she was wrapped in black clothes, her swollen and full chest reminded him of some unpleasant memories from before. When she turned around and came closer, he couldn't help but want to retreat. When this instinctive reaction came out, his heart trembled and he was inwardly startled. Could it be that tonight's events left a shadow in his heart? He hadn't married yet. What should he do if he was really afraid of women? Thinking of this, he instantly didn't even care about his master's bad mood. He turned around and walked back, somewhat absent-minded and somewhat flustered. When he returned to the courtyard, Ing Yi saw him. Seeing his strange expression, he asked, "What's wrong?" "I just went to the ghost doctor's place, but I didn't see her. However, I heard from the siblings Long Shuang and Long Hua that the ghost doctor wasn't in a good mood either. Furthermore, she slept without eating anything tonight." He didn't lower his voice, but spoke in his usual tone. When his voice fell, he glanced at the room, pointed at the room, and asked Ing Yi about his master's condition. After seeing Ing Yi shake his head at him, he sighed and went to the stone table in the courtyard and sat down. In the room, the king of hell, who was drinking alone, paused in his action of pouring wine when he heard Grey Wolf's words. She was in a bad mood too? She didn't eat when she came back tonight? He couldn't help but frown when he thought of how she had accompanied him all day and hadn't eaten anything other than the 100 fresh porridge she ate at noon. Why didn't this woman know how to take care of herself? Chapter 466. After a slight pause, he opened the door and walked out. As he walked out of the courtyard, he said to the two people in the courtyard, "Tell the kitchen to prepare a few dishes, 2 bowls of rice and a bowl of soup, and send it to her courtyard." As he spoke, he had already walked out of the courtyard. With his hands clasped behind his back, he walked towards Fengjiu's courtyard. The two people behind him looked at each other in dismay. Master went to the ghost doctor's place again? Wasn't he angry with her? Hui Lang was a little stunned. He wondered why his master didn't even have the slightest bit of temper when he met the ghost doctor. When he came back, he still had a stomach full of anger. Only now did he hear that his master hadn't eaten dinner. So he hurried over again. This is called a husband lacking in discipline. In the future, when he marries the ghost doctor, his master will definitely be eaten alive. Ingyi said and then said, "I'll go tell the kitchen to prepare food." AI. This is what it means to have one thing counter another. Hui Lang shook his head and followed him out. He wanted to see if his master couldn't even enter the ghost doctor's courtyard. On the other side, in Fengjiu's courtyard, when the Long Shuang who was guarding the courtyard saw the Yama Lord walk over, she was slightly startled. However, she still walked in front of him and blocked his path. "My master is already asleep. If the Yama Lord has something to say, then say it tomorrow." The Yama Lord swept a glance over her and walked in. In a few steps, he pushed open the door and entered. After entering the room, he didn't go into the inner room. Instead, he sat down at the table in the outer room. "Ben Jun has come to drink with you." This one sentence, stiff and low, made the sleepy Fengjiu who was lying on the bed slightly startled. His expression was strange. Lung Shuang saw that she could not stop him, so she went into the inner room and spoke to Fengjiu. Fengjiu motioned for her to leave. He got up, put on his coat, and walked out. She saw the Yama Lord sitting at the table, staring at her deeply. She gathered her coat and walked over. "Do you have wine?" she asked. Hearing this, the Yama Lord glanced at her and took out a jar of wine from the space. Top-grade spirit wine. At the same time, he took out 2 small jade-colored wine glasses. Seeing this, Fengjiu smiled and called out, "Lung Shuang, bring 2 bowls." The Yama Lord glanced at her and put away the 2 small glasses. Hui Lang, who was standing by the door, was dumbfounded. That was a top-grade spirit wine. 1 drop was worth 1,000 gold. And this ghost doctor actually wanted to drink it from a bowl? Could he not be so wasteful? Lung Shuang placed the 2 small bowls on the table and stepped back. He also stood by the door and looked at the 2 of them. "Pour the wine." Fengjiu motioned. Seeing that he was holding the wine jar without moving, she did not understand. "There's no hurry. The side dishes are not here yet." His low voice was magnetic. It was like mellow wine, very intoxicating in the night. "Why do we need side dishes to drink wine? If you don't drink, I'll pour first. Let's see what this top-grade spirit wine tastes like." As she spoke, she reached out to take the wine jar. Unexpectedly, the hand that reached out to grab the jar was pressed down by his hand. She looked up and suddenly laughed. "Can you not take advantage of me? Even if it's a hand, it's a woman's hand." The Yama Lord's mouth twitched imperceptibly. His deep eyes stared at her. He could also see that she was not right tonight. What was the reason? She was clearly smiling, but there was a hint of loneliness in her eyes. It made his heart clench. Chapter 467. Hui Lang and Long Shuang, who were at the door, looked inside and saw the Yama Lord holding the wine jar with one hand and Fengjiu's hand with the other. The 2 looked at each other like this, one smiling and the other staring. The atmosphere made the 2 guards feel strange. Fortunately, this strange atmosphere was quickly broken. Ingyi walked in with a few servants carrying food. When he saw the 2 guards at the door staring inside, he also looked inside. When he saw the scene in Fangchun, he coughed lightly and said, "Master, dinner is here. Come in." The Yama Lord ordered and patted her hand away. Then, he arranged the 2 bowls, unscrewed the wine jar, and poured half a bowl of wine into the bowls. After Ingyi ordered the servants to serve the food, he left the room. At the same time, He called the two guards outside the room and closed the door, leaving the two alone. When the Yama Lord saw Fengjiu pick up the bowl of wine and gulp it down, he couldn't help but frown slightly. He put some food in the bowl in front of her and said, "Drinking wine on an empty stomach is bad for the body. Eat some food." Fengjiu drank half a bowl of wine and her eyes lit up. "It's really the best spiritual wine. It's mellow and fragrant." Another bowl. She felt the spiritual wine flowing down her throat and reverberating in her stomach. A wave of spiritual energy was also mobilized, nourishing the veins in her body. She knew that this was an extremely rare spiritual wine. The spiritual wine she found for her grandfather in the past didn't have such rich spiritual energy, and the taste wasn't as mellow, but it was already considered the best. At least, she hadn't encountered this kind of wine, at least in the Qingting Kingdom. The Yama Lord glanced at her. "Another bowl? Do you think this is water? Eat." "I drank too little. I don't feel anything." She supported her face with one hand and looked at him with a smile. "Didn't you ask me to drink? Since you're here, don't be so stingy. How can you not enjoy drinking? This wine has a strong after effect. You won't be able to withstand it." "Don't worry, I won't get drunk. Even if I get drunk, I won't have sex after drinking. Don't worry." She waved her hand and said. However, when a certain man heard the words drunken sex, he glanced at her with his deep black eyes. He saw that she had only drunk half a bowl of wine, and her eyes were already a little blurred. Although she said that she wasn't drunk, her half-drunk expression was exceptionally charming, and it made his heart skip a beat. His mind was immediately filled with thoughts of drunkenness. "Why are you holding the wine jug in a daze? Quick, pour the wine." She frowned. Because she had drunk so much on an empty stomach, a layer of red had already appeared on her exquisite and beautiful face. Under the candlelight, she looked very alluring. At this moment, she was different from her usual self. Her languid appearance carried an enchanting charm. No matter how one looked at it, it was alluring. He unconsciously swallowed his saliva, and his deep gaze moved away from her seductive and drunken face. He coughed lightly and said, "Eat some food first, then I'll pour." He then added, "Tonight, you'll have enough wine." Hearing this, Fengjiu laughed. He slapped his hand on the table and laughed out loud. "Good. You're the one who said it. We won't go home until we're drunk." What strong alcohol! It was obvious that he was unwilling to let her drink. This stingy man. She was going to drink all his wine tonight. In the courtyard, Hui Lang and Ying secretly looked at each other when they heard the words coming from the room. "You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.